He never lost to an army, but he lost to a woman. A lion lunged at him. Mid-air, he caught it, ripped it apart. No weapon, just hands. He turned their fields into ashes. They came at him in numbers. Hundreds, more followed, but the bodies fell faster than they arrived. And when it ended, one man stood, breathing, unmoved, a jawbone in his hand. And then Delilah, watching, not afraid, not rushing, just waiting. Soft, careful, repeated again and again, until a secret slipped out. And just like that, darkness, tight chains, heavy, unbreakable. They took his eyes, but they couldn't take his purpose. So what was he? A weapon or a warning? Israel was in trouble, not for the first time, not for the last. The Philistines had ruled over them for 40 years. 40 years of occupation, 40 years of humiliation, 40 years of a people forgetting what freedom even felt like. There was no king in Israel. There were only judges, men and women raised up by God to rescue a nation that kept wandering away from the hand that saved it. Into this world, broken, occupied, desperate, a woman received a visitor. She had no name recorded in history. She was simply called Manoah's wife. But what she heard that day would change everything. An angel appeared, not in a dream, in the daylight. And the angel spoke words that would echo across millennia.
You are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and give birth to a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb.
A son, but not just any son. Do you understand what this means? Before he was born, before he took a single breath, this child had already been set apart. The Nazirite vow was ancient, sacred. 3 rules bound those who took it: no wine, no contact with the dead, and never, never cut the hair. The hair was not vanity. The hair was covenant. It was the physical mark of a promise between a man and the God who made him. Manoah and his wife were terrified when they understood the weight of it. Manoah asked the angel what they should do, how to raise this child, and the angel was clear. Train him in the vow, raise him for purpose. He will begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines. Begin to deliver, not complete. Begin. That word tells you everything. Samson was never meant to be the whole story. He was meant to be the opening chapter of Israel's liberation. A force of nature unleashed to push back the darkness, to crack the power of Philistia just enough for what would come next. He was born, and from the moment he entered the world, something moved in him. Judges tells us the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him, not teach him, not train him, stir, like something enormous waking up. He grew. We don't know much about his childhood. Scripture skips it. But we know what he became. We know the moment the world found out what was walking among them. And it did not happen in a courtroom, or a temple, or a battlefield. It happened on the road to a Philistine city, when a lion stepped out of the vineyard. A young lion, not a cub, a predator. Jaws that could crush bone, weight that could break a man. And Samson, with no weapon, no armor, he tore it apart with his bare hands. The text is quiet about it, almost offhand. Judges 14 says he tore the lion as one tears a young goat. And then he told no one. No announcement, no celebration. He just kept walking. He was chosen by God, but he was not yet prepared for himself. And that is where the story really begins.
The Philistines never saw him coming. Not the first time, not the 10th, not even the 100th. They kept sending men. He kept leaving bodies. Let me paint this picture for you, because the scale of what Samson did is genuinely insane. He was one man against the military apparatus of the most dominant power in the region. The Philistines were not raiders or bandits. They were organized, iron weapons, professional soldiers, city-states with walls and governors and standing armies. And Samson alone made them afraid. It started with fire. Before Delilah, Samson married this Philistine girl from Timnah. Scripture says the marriage collapsed before it even started. His Philistine bride betrayed a riddle he'd told her, whispered it to the guests on the wedding night while Samson slept. She gave away his secret to 30 men. When he found out, he left. He came back later, expecting his wife. Her father had given her to another man. "I thought you hated her," the father said. "I gave her to your companion." Samson's rage boiled over. He caught 300 foxes, 300, tied them tail to tail in pairs, tied torches to the knots between them, set the torches on fire, and released them into the fields. Standing grain, olive orchards, vineyards, all of it burned to ash. The Philistines watched a year's worth of food turn to smoke and didn't know what to do. So they killed his wife and her father. That was their mistake. Samson's response was simple. "If this is what you do, I will surely take revenge on you, and after that I will quit." And then he struck them, Judges says, hip and thigh with a great blow. The text doesn't give us a body count here, just the phrase, "great slaughter." The Philistines had enough. 3,000 men of Judah, his own people, terrified, went to him and said, "Do you not know that the Philistines rule over us? What is this you have done to us?" And Samson calmly agreed to be handed over, on one condition. "Swear to me that you won't attack me yourselves." They tied him with 2 new ropes. They brought him to the Philistines, and the Philistines shouted when they saw him coming. They thought they had him. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. The ropes on his arms became like burning flax. They melted off his wrists like they were made of nothing. And his eyes found something on the ground, the jawbone of a donkey, fresh, still heavy, curved like a blade. He picked it up, and he killed 1,000 men. 1,000 men with a bone.
When it was over, when the field was silent and the dust was settling over 1,000 Philistine bodies, Samson stood there, breathless, and said, "With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey have I struck down 1,000 men." There has never been a warrior like him. There has never been a moment like it. But even in his greatest triumph, something broke through. "I am very thirsty," he cried to God. "Shall I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" The strongest man alive, begging for water. God split open the ground, and water poured out, and Samson drank. He was a force that could not be stopped by any army on earth. No weapon could touch him, no chain could hold him, no army could break him. But something else could, something far more dangerous than a sword.
She is in the valley of Sorek. Her name, Delilah. Scripture doesn't describe her appearance. Doesn't need to. Because what made Delilah dangerous wasn't beauty. It was availability. It was the way she let him stay. The way she didn't flinch at who he was. The way a man like Samson, always moving, always fighting, always alone, would feel in the presence of someone who seemed to want him there. He loved her. Judges 16:4 says it plainly. Not desire, not chose, loved. This is the first time Scripture uses that word about Samson and a woman. The greatest warriors always have the same blind spot. Not an enemy's blade, not a better strategy. Attachment. Something they cannot bring themselves to leave. The lords of the Philistines came to Delilah with a proposal. 5 of them. Each man brought 1,100 pieces of silver. That's 5,500 pieces of silver total. For one thing. Seduce him. Find out where his great strength lies. Find out how we can overpower him, bind him, and humiliate him. And Delilah accepted. She didn't storm his camp. She didn't send assassins. She didn't even change how she acted around him. She just waited. And then she asked, "Tell me, Samson, where does your great strength come? How could someone bind you to humble you?"
Tell me, Samson, what is the secret of your strength?
And here is the moment where Samson should have walked away, where every alarm in his chest should have fired, where the man chosen by God before birth should have heard something whisper, "This is a trap." But he stayed. He answered, "7 fresh bowstrings. If I'm bound with those, I become weak like any other man." That night, Delilah bound him while he slept. Men were hiding in the inner room. She called out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He snapped the bowstrings. The men fled. Delilah said nothing. She asked again. He lied again. "New ropes. If I'm bound with new ropes, I become like any other man." He broke free. She asked again. He lied again. 7 locks of hair woven into a loom. He tore the weave apart without effort. 3 times. Here is what nobody talks about. 3 times she used him. 3 times she handed him to men waiting with weapons. 3 times he escaped. And stayed. He knows she's doing it. He knows she's working against him. He knows the men are in the room. And he stayed.
What was inside Samson in those moments? Was it arrogance? He'd survived everything else. He could survive this. Was it desire, the one force that had always defeated his judgment? Was it something darker, a man so exhausted by his own power that he almost wanted to be stopped? We don't know. We just know he stayed. Then Delilah changed weapons. She stopped asking sweetly. She started pressing. Every day, how can you say you love me when your heart is not with me? Every day, you have mocked me 3 times. Every day, you haven't told me where your great strength comes from. Judges 16:16. She pressed him hard with her words day after day and urged him so that his soul was vexed to death. Vexed to death. Not annoyed, not frustrated, vexed to death. The man who killed 1,000 soldiers in one afternoon, worn down by words. Not swords, not armies, words, daily, relentless, patient. And the words that finally broke him weren't threats, they were the oldest manipulation in human history. You don't love me. She didn't break his strength, she broke his patience. And patience, it turns out, was the last wall between Samson and his destruction. No razor has ever touched my head. He said it, the secret he'd carried since before he was born, the covenant between himself and God, written not in ink, but in the length of his hair. Delilah knew it was true this time. She could feel it. She sent for the Philistine lords. "Come up once more, for he has told me all his heart." They came, silver in hand, and Samson fell asleep on her lap, with his enemies standing in the doorway. He fell asleep in the lap of the woman who had been systematically destroying him. She called for a man with a razor. 7 locks, cut. And then she called out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you!" He woke, and Judges 16:20, this is the line that will haunt you. He did not know that the Lord had left him. He did not know. He shook himself, he rose, he expected to snap the soldier's hands like threads the way he always had. But his arms, those arms that had torn apart a lion, were just arms, ordinary, human, weak. They seized him. They gouged out his eyes. The man who had seen everything, who had surveyed battlefields from about the chaos, was suddenly in permanent darkness. They brought him to Gaza, the city he had once carried the gates out of on his shoulders. They bound him with bronze shackles, and they put him to work grinding grain in the prison. The strongest man who had ever lived, grinding grain, like an animal, like a slave. The Philistines mocked him, paraded their prize, celebrated their victory. And in the darkness, blind, chained, humiliated, Samson ground grain and probably tried to remember what the sunlight looked like. But there's something the Philistines didn't notice. Something small, almost invisible. His hair was growing back. The Philistines were throwing a party, a massive, extravagant festival in honor of their god Dagon. 3,000 people packed into the temple, lords, soldiers, citizens, filling the roof, filling the floor, filling every space between the pillars. And at the center of their celebration, their trophy. They brought Samson out of prison, blind, shackled, stumbling. They made him perform for them. They laughed at the man who had killed thousands of them.
The lords called to each other, "Our God has given our enemy into our hand." Samson was led to the center of the temple. He asked the boy leading him, "Let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them." The boy led him to the pillars, two main pillars, holding everything up. He placed one hand on one pillar, one hand on the other, and in the dark, in the blindness, in the chains, he tilted his face upward and he prayed. Not a sermon, not a speech, 5 words, desperate, human, broken. "O Lord, remember me. Please strengthen me only this once. Let me die with the Philistines." He braced, both hands on the pillars. He pushed. The roof came down. The walls came down. 3,000 people, lords, soldiers, the men who had blinded him, the women who had laughed at him, buried in dusk under the house of a God who couldn't save them. Judges 16:30 says simply, "So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those he had killed during his life. In his death, more than his life." His brothers came for him. They dug through the rubble of the temple of Dagon. They found him, and they carried him home, and they buried him in the tomb of his father, Manoah. He had judged Israel for 20 years. He had fought alone when no one would fight with him. He had carried a secret power no army could defeat. And then, in the end, blind and broken in chains, he finally asked for help. He lost everything, and in the end, he gave everything. Samson's story isn't a story about strength. It's a story about what happens when power has no anchor, when gift has no discipline, when a man chosen by God spends his whole life choosing himself. And yet, in his worst moment, blind, mocked, chained, God heard him. Maybe that's the part they don't tell you. Maybe Samson isn't just a warning. Maybe he's also a portrait of something uncomfortable and true, that God doesn't abandon people when they fall. He was there in the prison. He was there in the dark. He was there when the hair started growing back. The question isn't what Samson was. The question is what you are. Because most of us will never tear a lion apart, but most of us know exactly what our jawbone is and exactly what our Delilah is. Was Samson a hero chosen by God, or a man destroyed by his own weakness? Or was he both? Drop your answer in the comments below, and if this story hit different, you know what to do.